Hey, all you cool cats and kittens, it's your favorite history teacher back at you again with another historical video. Today, we're going to talk a little bit about economics, more so economics, not really economics. I'm talking about how these people, Europeans thought best to improve their society based on the differences between the Industrial Revolution and, the causes between the rich and the poor. So let's get into it. All right. So here we have New Ways of Thinking, Chapter 5, Section 4. Man, we're done. This is the last section of this unit, of this chapter, and we have a test coming up shortly this week. So New Ways of Thinking, Chapter 5, Section 4. All right, that was your warm-up. Objective. So you'll be able to assess the harsh conditions created by the Industrial Revolution, examine the competing solutions to these creations, and understand the differences between utilitarianism, utopianism, socialism, and communism. Yay. So heirs of the Enlightenment. Everywhere in Britain, you had British economist Thomas Malthus witness the effects of the population explosion, crowded slums, hungry families, unemployment, and misery. In 1798, after a careful study, he published a book, a treatise, an essay on the principle of population. And in this, he concluded that poverty was unavoidable because the population was increasing faster than the food supply. There's a quote, "The power of the population is far greater than the power of the earth to produce subsistence for man." And Malthus was one of the many thinkers who tried to understand the staggering changes that had taken place. And these people are known as heirs of the Enlightenment. If you think about heirs, what's an heir? Like the son or daughter, the offspring, the children. No, I wouldn't call them children, but the heirs of the Enlightenment. And these thinkers looked for natural laws that govern the world of business and economics. So laissez-faire comes back again. During the Enlightenment, physiocrats argue that, remember physiocrats, people who are about free market or laissez-faire capitalism, right? Hands off. I don't think I ever did that. Laissez-faire means hands off approach. Physiocrats argue that natural laws should be allowed to operate without interference. So as a part of this, did I teach? I don't think I did. Oops, this is the slide. Getting ahead of myself. Should be allowed to operate without interference. As a part of this philosophy, they believe that government should not interfere in the free operation of the economy. That's what we call the free market. So in the early 1800s, business leaders embraced this laissez-faire, hands-off approach. So if we were in class, I would be like, all right, guys, so whenever you hear the word laissez-faire, do this motion, hands-off, okay? Where the government has their hands off the operation of the economy. There's no government interference. So a main proponent of laissez-faire was Adam Smith in his book, The Wealth of Nations. It has a longer title, but it's shortened to The Wealth of Nations. And this is a test question. And in it, Smith asserted that a free market, which is the unregulated exchange of goods and services, would come to help everyone, not just the rich. The free market would produce more goods at lower prices, making them affordable for everyone because, poor. And a growing economy would also encourage capitalists to reinvest profits into new ventures because these capitalists, these entrepreneurs, hey, I'm getting ahead of myself. Actually, no, I'm not. Entrepreneurs, people who risk their capital. if they make so much more money, we can reinvest over here, we reinvest over there. You know, if it fails, it fails. If the other one works, you're making double the money, right? So supporters of this free enterprise capitalism point to the successes of the Industrial Revolution, in which the government had no part of. So they're saying that the successes, capitalism created successes for the Industrial Revolution, of which government can't really, you know, claim. All right, hashtag bestseller, The Wealth of Nations, Adam Smith. Nice profile, bro. All right, the Malthusian population theory. So at the beginning, you know, a couple slides ago, talked about Thomas Malthus. And Thomas Malthus is about this population theory. So you can say that, you know, Adam Smith, which we already talked about. What am I trying to say? Adam Smith is, you know, for free market capitalism, the unregulated exchange of goods and services, free market. Okay. Now we get into a little more nitpicky of how the economy should work or how society should best fix itself. So also a laissez-faire economist, hands off, Thomas Malthus predicted that a population would outpace the food supply. And he said the only checks on population growth were the nature's natural methods of war, disease, and famine. And coronavirus. As long as the population kept increasing, the poor will suffer. He urged families to have less children and discouraged charitable handouts and vaccinations. Ooh, he's an anti-vaxxer. Why? Because if you get vaccinated, you'll live longer, which will cause the earth to deplete itself because they got to feed more people. And during the 1800s, many people accepted this bleak view. It was proved wrong, though, so that even though the population kept going up, so did the food supply. And what does that say about today? As the century progressed, living conditions slowly improved for the West, and people started having fewer children. And by 1900, population growth was no longer an issue. That's Thomas Malthus saying, have less kids, people. All right, dismal science. Another British laissez-faire, hands off, economist, David Ricardo, dedicated himself to the economic studies after reading Smith's Wealth of Nations. Like Malthus, Ricardo did not hold out hope for the working class to escape poverty. Because of such gloomy predictions, economics became known as the dismal science. He also wrote a book called The Iron Law of Wages, in which he pointed out that wage increases were futile because increases would only cover the cost of necessities. So, meaning that just because you get, you know, a percentage increase on your salary, on your wages per hour, you know, it's futile because, hey, well, here in America, taxes, and, you know, obviously in Europe, European countries, taxes there too. And so just because, you know, you get a 10% raise, you know, that's only going to cover the cost of necessities. That's not immediately going to raise your standard of living to where you can just buy luxurious things and be on that bougie lifestyle, okay? So when wages were high, families often had more children instead of raising the current standard of living. And so both Malthus and Ricardo opposed any government help for the poor. He said the best cure for poverty was not government relief, but the unrestricted laws of the free market. So he felt that individuals should be left to improve their own life, their own gains through thrift, hard work, and limiting the size of their families. All right, so building upon one another. You know, Malthus reads Smith and Ricardo reads Malthus and Smith, and, you know, they're just developing more specific theories, okay? That's David Ricardo. He kind of looks like Thomas Malthus. Would you say so? I don't know. Anyways, Bentham's utility. So others thought to modify laissez-faire doctrines, hands off, to justify some government intervention. And by 1800, British philosopher and economist Jeremy Bentham advocated for something called utilitarianism. It was, and in it, he said that the goal of society should be, quote, the greatest happiness for the greatest number of its citizens. Bentham thought all laws and actions should be judged by their utility. And by that, I mean, did this service or good provide more pleasure or happiness than pain? He was a strong supporter of individual freedom, which guaranteed happiness. He still thought there was a need for the government to become involved under certain circumstances. So now Bentham, he's not a true, it says right there, to modify laissez-faire doctrines to justify some government intervention. So yes, he believes the government shouldn't intervene to give out handouts, but he's saying that the government needs to step in sometimes. Okay. And this is Jeremy Bentham looking like Ben Franklin. Mill's take. So Bentham's ideas influenced yet another British philosopher and economist, John Stuart Mill. And he strongly believed in individual freedom. Mill wanted the government to step in to improve the lives of the working class. Okay, the only purpose for which power can be rightfully exercised over any member of a civilized community against his will is to prevent harm to others. That is what he said, government should do. So while middle-class businesses and factory owners were entitled to increase their own happiness, he thought the government should prevent them from doing so in a manner that would harm workers, because if these owners and businesses just keep making more and more money, that is the more and more money taken away from the ability workers can earn. So Mill was for giving the right to vote for workers, who could then use their political power to win over reforms, elect people who were for workers' rights. Okay, middle-class people rejected this. It was only later, until the 1800s, that Mill's views were more accepted. And talk about crazy. Look at his hair. That's my future. Anyways, shh. He said the S word. All right, S word, socialism. You don't have to say he said that. You don't have to write that. You can just write down socialism. Okay, so while laissez-faire economics praised individual rights, other thinkers focused on the good of society in general. And they condemned the evils of industrial capitalism, which they believed they had created a gap between the rich and the poor. To end poverty and injustice, they offered a radical solution: socialism. Under socialism, the people as a whole, rather than private individuals, would own and operate the means of production, such as the farms, factories, railways, and other large businesses that produce and distributed goods. Socialism grew out of the Enlightenment faith in progress, its belief in the basic goodness of human nature, and its concern for social justice. All right, keep dreaming, bro. So a number of early socialists will establish communities which work was shared and all property was owned in common. When there was no difference between the rich and the poor, fighting between these people disappeared. And these early socialists were called utopians. And the name implied that they were based upon impractical dreams. You know, a utopian society is the perfect society. There are no problems. All right, it is a utopia. Everyone will want to go there. It's a perfect society. There's no rich, there's no poor. Everyone's happy. But let's be honest, people. You know human beings. All right, and Robert Owen was the first to set up this model community in New Lanark, Scotland, to put his own ideas to practice. And that's Robert Owen, kind of looking like Snape's doppelganger. We got doppelgangers galore in history. All right, the C word, or communism. All right, so the next couple of slides are a test question, I believe. So in the 1840s, German philosopher Karl Marx condemned the ideas of utopians as an as unrealistic idealism. You know, there is no such thing as a perfect society. He formulated a new theory called scientific socialism, which I need to change that. Which was based on a scientific study of history. He teamed up with another German socialist, Friedrich Engels. And Marx and Engels wrote a pamphlet called the Communist Manifesto, 1848. And there's a quote from it: "A specter or ghost is haunting Europe, the specter of communism." So, definition: communism is a form of socialism in which an inevitable struggle between social classes would lead to the creation of a classless society in which all means of production would be then owned by the community. Communism, community. You see that? Okay. All right. So socialism. Think of socialism as if you've ever heard of an umbrella term, think of socialism as the beginning. All right. And from socialism, you get communism. All right. You could say communism is an heir to socialism. Okay. It just takes it a little bit further. All right. Yes, remember, this definition of socialism didn't really say there's a classless society. It's just that when there's no discrepancy between the rich and the poor, there's less fighting. Okay. Communism is saying there's an inevitable struggle between the social classes, which there will be fighting, and it will lead to a creation of a classless society, which then, branches off from a little bit of socialism, saying everything owned and operated is shared by the community. Okay. So yes, honestly, two of the world's most epic beards. This is Karl Marx. Get used to that face, because we're going to be talking about him through and through. Karl Marx and Friedrich Engels. I don't know if anyone could ever get a goatee that big. Certainly not me. All right, the haves versus the have-nots. So, test question. In the manifesto, Marx theorized that economics was the driving force in history. Money, money, money. So he argued that that there was a history of class struggles between the haves and the have-nots. The haves always had owned the means of production and controlled society and all its wealth, aka the bourgeoisie, middle class. The have-nots were the proletariat, or the working class. And to Marx, the struggle between the bourgeoisie and the proletariat, the struggle would be those two, and in the end, he predicted the proletariat would win. Workers would then take control of the means of production and set up a classless, communist society. And this is kind of known as a little bit of Marxism, which is kind of like communism, but more specific. Okay. Such a society would mark the end of struggles people had endured throughout history, and because wealth and power would now be shared. But boy, is that just a theory. Hashtag the future. So, in the 1860s, Germany adapted Marx's beliefs to form a social democracy, a political ideology in which there is a gradual transition from capitalism to socialism instead of a violent overthrow of the system. It's a nice ease into it. By the late 1800s, Russian socialists embraced Marxism, and the Russian Revolution in 1917 will set up a communist-inspired government. For much of the 1900s, revolutionaries around the world would adapt Marxist ideas to their own situations and needs. Independence leaders in Asia, Latin America, and Africa would also turn to Marxism. Hashtag fail. As time passed, the failures of Marxist governments would illustrate the flaws in Marx's arguments. He predicted that the workers would unite across national borders to wage class warfare. Instead, nationalism will win out over working class loyalty. Love for one's country. In general, people felt stronger ties to their own countries than to the international communist movement. Like, think of it this way: if your country fought for and gained, social workers' rights, why would you want to spread it across the international scene if you just want it to be more of your country, more Romanian, more Polish, more Czechoslovakian, right? Rather than saying, oh, we need to spread communism everywhere. But by the end of the 20th century, only a few nations remained with the communist government style, while every other economy included elements of free market capitalism. And that's it. All right. Hopefully y'all enjoyed parts of that. Parts of it. Hopefully you enjoyed some of it. It was a little bleak, a little dismal, but it is what it is. That concludes this chapter, actually. So we're done with this chapter. You're gonna have a test this week on Unit 4, and hopefully y'all are ready. I mean, it was a short test. So yeah. Your homework is page 188, 3 through 5. And as always, stay safe, wash your hands,